The Cincinnati Bengals absolutely must figure out their financial situations before training camp, or it will ruin their season once again. We'll discuss on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we're going to look at the biggest question for three teams before training camp comes back around. We'll talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. Should they add more talent like Jaire Alexander? The Kansas City Chiefs, they have some financial situations of their own to figure out. But we'll start, of course, with the Cincinnati Bengals, who once again are just absolutely devastated by financial situations, multiple ones at the same exact time. Before we get into it, though, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So, Lauren, here we are again. Another offseason, same issue with Cincinnati. Trey Hendrickson, angry with the team about not having a new contract. They have their first-round pick, Shemar Stewart, leaving mandatory minicamp early with no deal and making comments disparaging the organization. It's not quite Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but it's pretty bad for Cincinnati right now. But we did get the report from Adam Schefter on Sunday night that Trey Hendrickson could be coming back to the table. So if I'm Cincinnati, or if we're looking at Cincinnati, I think the biggest question for them going into training camp is clearly, can they get these things nipped in the bud and go into training camp with a full regular team without this financial black cloud over them?
You would think watching practice and seeing that defensive line without Hendrickson or Shemar Turner, and you've got Joseph Ossai and Miles Murphy as your starting edge rushers. Like
you love Shemar Turner, Lauren Cox, and it's Shemar Stewart, his teammate. You love Shemar Turner. Yeah.
You would think that would be the wake up call for them to say like, hey, this pass rush, it is totally empty without either of these two top guys. Like this was supposed to be their plan A. It was like two pass rushers. It's one thing if one guy's just not out there and it's like whatever, but like you've got nothing here. And I wonder if there's some external pressure now as well when they see TJ Watt holding out in Pittsburgh and saying, if Watt gets a new deal, then that's going to raise Trey Hendrickson's price even higher. So maybe we got to come back to the negotiating table and get something done, because maybe they wanted to play the long game, but now there's some outside competition here.
Lauren, that is a fantastic point. They need to beat TJ Watt to the table. And look, I know that may sound crazy, but Trey Hendrickson has outperformed TJ Watt the last two seasons, if you look at him in totality. And he certainly did last year when Watt kind of had a bad end of the season. There's, speculation he was super injured and all of that. But regardless, if you're Trey Hendrickson, I don't care. I wasn't injured, and I should get paid for being out there and being available and doing what I did. They have to get this done. They absolutely have to get the Trey Hendrickson thing done. And you look at Miles Murphy as another first-round pick on that defensive line. Who is he going to step up in this situation? So you're right. They need to get this, because it's like a cluster injury situation. It's a cluster contract situation. So they have to get the Trey Hendrickson thing done as quick as possible, like you said, to beat TJ Watt. But the Shemar Stewart thing should work itself out, right? Like there's just no way that he's going to pass on playing in the NFL this year, skip the season, and go back into the NFL draft, which is what his leverage, I guess in theory, could be. Now, he's a young enough player, and people were really high on the ability for him to develop. So maybe with those factors playing in, he could conceivably get away with this. But no matter what turns out, and I think it will turn out okay, this is an ugly situation that hurts the Bengals, and our guys over at Locked On Bengals talked about that.
And it's like, he left after Wednesday's practice. And what I thought was interesting is he left after practice Wednesday, and it gets over mid-afternoon. And then Jordan Schultz tweeted a picture of him, and he's been working out at Black Sheep Performance for a few weeks now, the same place Joe Burrow works out at, and a bunch of other Bengals players work out at. But an NFL insider's tweeting a video of him on the bike. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's why that was tweeted. He's like, hey, see, I'm still working, but I'm not showing back up at minicamp. Like, I'm sure. And so didn't show up. Do I think he missed anything today? No, not at all. Everyone watching and listening could have made it through minicamp day 3 practice, I would say confidently, but especially tasked with what Shamar was going to be tasked with, which is standing there. But this is a distraction, and it's a big distraction, and it's going to be a big topic until he signs, until he's on the field, until we see 97 with a helmet on, or in practice uniform and working out. Until that happens, this is going to be something we discuss. It probably won't just be today, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. And for us, I would say unfortunately, because I would much rather be talking about how he fits in on this football team. And we just haven't seen that yet. And I don't think anyone's thinking about that right now, because it feels like it's one simple thing, as we'll get into, but it feels like we're a long ways away from him getting on the field.
So the question becomes, do you think it does work out, or do you think that he would go to the extreme and sit out the season and get back in the draft? And do you think at this point, with the time that he's missed, even though it's off-season stuff, it will affect his ultimate trajectory throughout the season when he does get on the field, I guess?
Yeah, for me, it's like just believable enough as a possibility that it's good leverage, right? I think there's a lot of players that it's just like, yeah, everyone has that option, but realistically, like, there's no way. And he's not, I mean, in all likelihood, he's not going to, but like, this is not a player who's like coming off of some huge breakout season that got him drafted in the first round. And if you add another year of time where it's like, well, it's, now is he still going to be the same guy? Like, he already had aggressively low production in college. This was already a traits based, kind of not ignore the tape, because the tape there's still traits on tape, but like ignore the production, ignore what we saw in the field in some ways, and like project out forward. And so like another year of being away wouldn't necessarily drastically change the evaluation there. So I don't think he's going to. I think this will resolve, but it's a stupid Bengals like latest in the same theory, the same track record of like shooting themselves in the foot with the contract language they're trying to put in there that isn't standard for a lot of other players. And it's just like, is this a first round pick? Like, just get him in there. It's not even a financial issue. The salary's locked in. Just you don't even have the money as an excuse this time, because it's not even a money issue. It's like a future money guarantee, flexibility kind of stuff that's just missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and the Bengals are in a tough spot because like other teams around the league use that language. Like most of the teams, I think it was all like 17 to 18 teams around the NFL use that language in their first round rookie contract, but the Bengals haven't in the past. So they're like trying to like protect themselves like everybody else, but it's causing this big black eye on the organization. You know what I mean? It is a very difficult spot, but ultimately I think if Shamar Stewart were to do that, he probably doesn't get drafted in the first round again. And then you're sacrificing money and you gave up a year of money. And I agree, like we were talking about earlier, and you just reiterated, there are certain factors here that make it more realistic for Shamar Stewart than maybe you would think. But also at the same time, the financial aspect of it, I think the Bengals do get both of these things resolved, but the thing is they need to get them resolved before training camp, because they're a team that, if you look at the last few seasons, they always get off to a slow start. The Bengals always get off to a slow start, and then they're trying to fight their way out of that hole, and we've seen the last couple of years they're not able to do that. So they need to get their big question mark, which is these financial situations, they need to get this figured out before training camp if they want to have the most productive season possible. And if they don't, I'm going to be right here on the show when training camp starts to say the Bengals kind of botched this already.
One other quick thing about Shamar, like if he does sit out for the full year, I think one of the other convince teams that like he's super rational about this and he's not going to be a holdout if they draft him in next year's draft, and that he's not, because teams may take the Bengals side and say like, okay, well, I understand why the Bengals did that. So why are you, Shamar Stewart, causing the problem? You're like, we don't want to draft you. Are you going to hold out for us too if we draft you the second time around? Like, realistically, it just doesn't make a lot of sense that it would actually happen, but it's just enough of a threat that you're like, well, the 1%, maybe it could. It's not zero.
Hey, his agent, he's trying to find every piece of leverage he can find under any rock that he can find. And, I guess that's the job. But with that being said, we got to talk about some teams that have been doing some major winning, unlike the Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Their biggest question heading into training camp. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There is nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you truly have to experience live. This year's matchup is already delivering, and if you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to tip-off, and they have killer last-minute deals, panoramic views from your seat, and no surprise fees. Gametime is a game changer because it has the best features in the industry. I've bought NFL, NBA, WNBA, MLB, concert, comedy tickets, all on Gametime, and it always delivers because you got the Gametime guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Cincinnati Bengals. We got, news from Adam Schefter. They're back at the table with Trey Hendrickson, and they need to get those financial situations figured out before training camp. But we pivot to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs aren't a team that in the offseason get a lot of conversation. They're kind of a boring offseason team. You can count on them to be good. Not a lot of mystery there. It's the Chiefs. But look a little deeper. Look a little closer at Kansas City, and they have a lot going on right now and a lot of tough decisions. They lost that Super Bowl to the Philadelphia Eagles because their roster was not good enough. It was not close to as good of a roster as Kansas City, and even though they have a better quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, who I think is significantly better than Jalen Hurts as a player, the overwhelming talent of the Eagles roster was too much, and Kansas City has kind of dropped back. In a couple of years, I think they won that Super Bowl a year ago, and I think people were kind of surprised. They didn't have the greatest, regular season, even though they were getting wins, and we were all wondering, hey, did they have enough talent around? And then they did, but it was clearly a step back from maybe the Super Bowl team before that. So, and the Tyreek Hill Super Bowl team as well. So now we're hearing from our guys over at Locked On Chiefs that there are some contract situations that they're really having a hard time juggling.
The guy that is close to being a top 3 paid offensive guard in this league. And I felt like last week it was just too far to go for him to miss mandatory. I know that they're not super happy with each other. He has not been here, Trey Smith, for any of the OTAs to this point. But this is where money matters. And it's a quick escalation, too. You start next week if he misses the first day of mandatory minicamp, meaning that he does not participate and he is not in the building. That is a distinction we should make. 17 grand the first day, 35 the next day, 50 the next day. He could lose 104 grand for not coming to these 3 practices in some way, shape, or form. I don't think that happens. I don't think it gets to a finable spot, but I am starting to feel like with Andy Reid's comments that he can't really say whether he's going to be here. There's one way around the fines that I think is probably the most likely scenario right now, and I know the lowdown. Would you think that is likely what's to happen?
I'm going to be curious to see if he shows up. I mean, the reality is he could show up and just do a hold in, be at the facility, be on the field with the team, but not practice and not get fined. And quite frankly, it's possible that the team would want that just as much as Trey would, because the reality is right now he did sign his franchise tag. So you're under obligation for $23.4 million. Do you really want to have him out there risking injury with that as his deal?
And that makes sense. Not having Trey Smith on the field for the financial reasons makes sense. But if you're looking at the Chiefs and they traded Joe Thuney and now Trey Smith is missing time and they're already, counting on a rookie in Josh Simmons to get healthy and take the left tackle spot, or Jalen Moore, who they signed from San Francisco? He's been more of a backup type player. Is he going to step into that role? They already had a ton of questions on the offensive line, and I feel like they have more questions now than they had when we already were worried about him. Do you think that they've just lost too much talent, and now with all these contract situations, they're going to lose more? Do you think we might be looking at a little bit of a lull for the Chiefs for the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I looked ahead. The Chiefs' salary cap space for next offseason is negative $36 million as we stand today right now. In part because Patrick Mahomes' salary cap hit number is $78 million next season. Now, obviously, they'll restructure that. They'll save like $40 million. They'll be able to create space, right? But like they're in this like New Orleans Saints mode of like, got to just keep pushing it down the line in the future. And all of it to me highlights like how critical it is for a team like this to just, you have to hit on your draft picks. And when you don't, like, you know, their first one pick a couple years ago, Felix Uzoma, like hasn't really been that big of a hit as a first one pick. Xavier Worthy's been slow to come along. Like
Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I remember that.
Like, you're seeing them pay for not having hit on those picks the way that they needed to.
Yeah. And I think some of the picks that they've hit on, it was all in the same time period now, and it has to be consistent enough to where you have people to replace it and replace it and replace it. Like Kingsley Suamatai, who was their draft pick in the second round last year, was meant to be a left tackle. Couldn't get on the field last year despite their issues, had some injuries. Now they're going to try him out at guard. You know, you're already taking a guy who you thought was a tackle last year, couldn't help you with your problem, and now you're already moving him. It's like stuff like that. And when you have Trent McDuffie, and you have George Karlaftis, and you have Trey Smith, and you got to figure out how to pay everybody while paying Patrick Mahomes, like you talked about, like you're moving money around. It just makes it nearly impossible. So I think it's pretty obvious that the biggest question for the Chiefs is, have they done enough to add talent to this roster? And I look around, you get, you know, Hollywood Brown back. Rashee Rice is going to be back. That should be a big help. Jalen Royals, if he's healthy, coming out of Utah State, can be a helpful player there. But I'll just keep looking at the offensive line. Despite the weapons, I just don't know. You know what I mean? And Patrick Mahomes started making more mistakes. So I think, obviously, we look at the big question for the Chiefs is, have they done enough? And right now I look at it, and I think if I had to give an answer, I would say they really haven't. I don't think that they're a significantly better team right now than the team that we saw lose in the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we don't miss the forest for the trees here, right? Where it's like they still were in the Super Bowl last year, right? As much as we criticize, like, okay, they don't have enough talent and they haven't been
Super Bowl hangover.
Yeah, but like I found myself as we were looking through Chiefs draft picks. I was like, oh, maybe should we be more critical of Brett Veach as a general manager? He's not drafting very well. I was like, no, he's won 3 Super Bowls and beat them
Right.
2 more. Like, yeah, yes, they've made some mistakes, but it's not like, you know, it's not like they're some downtrodden team that we should feel bad for. Like, oh no, are they going to be able to keep winning? It's like, all right, like they've been very, very successful. It's okay.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, everyone deserves their credit and everything like that. But I will say, though, Lauren, I do think we might see a little bit of a lull here. Like, I have continued to say, I am not going to pick the Kansas City Chiefs to win their division this year. I'm going to have them making the playoffs, but I think that the hunger for a team like the Chargers, for a team like the Broncos, something like, I think one of those teams are good enough. Both of them are good enough, and Kansas City's going to have a first place schedule. You know what I mean? Like, I just think there's a clear path here to the Chiefs have a Super Bowl hangover that all of the losing teams always have. Their roster didn't get significantly better, and quite frankly, with some of these absences and some of these contract things, they might be just a little bit worse than they were last year. And if that happens and the other teams that were close to them get a little bit better and their schedules are a little bit easier, all of those factors can come together to mean Kansas City doesn't win that division. So that's going to be one of my bold predictions here. And I just, you know, if the question is, have they done enough to add talent? I don't think they have.
That's all very smart and reasonable and well thought out. They've won the division 10 years in a row, and they still have Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's just like, well, you don't need logic anymore. You just kind of got to say, all right, they'll figure it out, because no matter what we think on the outside, they find a way to win 12 games in first place in the AFC East or AFC West.
Well, Well, you're not wrong about that, but it's not called a likely prediction, Lauren. It's a bold prediction, and that's what I'm going with. But absolutely fair. They're probably going to be right back in it. But it will be interesting to see how this offensive line comes along, and I think it'll be something that we talk about in the national conversation around the Chiefs centers on throughout the season, is how that new look offensive line comes together. But with that being said, you got to talk about the team that beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Philadelphia Eagles might be looking to add some more talent. So we talked about the biggest question for the Bengals so far, or looking forward to training camp, the biggest question for the Chiefs. Now I want to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we do, though, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen. For your second listen, though, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. As training camp gets closer, moves are still being made. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Looking at the Eagles, they're always looking to add more talent. A guy like Jaire Alexander could be on the menu for Philly. And my guy, Louis DiBiase from Locked On Eagles, talked about the potential move.
Now that he is on the open market, I think Jaire Alexander makes a lot of sense for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I did not have interest in Alexander when the Packers wanted to trade him over the last few months, because you look at the contract that he had. You're going to pay that guy $17 to $20 million, plus you're going to give up a draft pick in a trade for a 28-year-old cornerback that has missed 10-plus games in back-to-back years. When you have Quinyon Mitchell, when you have Cooper DeJean, like, could you use another proven cornerback if you don't believe in Keely Ringo? Sure. Is it worth like a, second or third round, even a fourth round pick for Alexander? And you're taking on that money for the Eagles. That didn't make sense. But now that the Packers and Alexander could not agree on a restructure, now I'm intrigued. Because although those things are still true, what I said about Alexander, he is only a few years away from 30. He's only played in single-digit games each season in the last 2 years. He's missed double-digit games in back-to-back years. He's kind of the Dallas Goedert of defense, right? Amazing elite player when he's on the field, but you just know you can't rely on him. Those things are all still true. But for the Eagles now, it might be worth kicking the tires. Now it suddenly seems like a move that's similar to, signing Azeez Ojulari or, signing Joshua Uche on the defensive line. Low risk, high reward. Jaire Alexander now, you can look at it in a different way. He's only 28 years old, still has a couple years where he can really help you compete for Super Bowls in the secondary. I think when he is on the field, he's still an elite football player.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get him on a pretty affordable short-term kind of deal, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, like, what his market ends up looking like there,
Right,
financially there. Because, I mean, the Eagles have a little room to spend. They have a little cap space. They've got some room for it. But, like, anything that becomes a more major investment, you worry about kind of disrupting what they're building in Philadelphia, where it's like you want to have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean on the field playing as much as possible. And somebody like Keely Ringo continuing to develop on the back end there. Like, it does feel a little bit to me like adding at a position that, not that they couldn't use more boosts. Everybody could use better cornerbacks, but I just wonder if you're putting that much, depending on how much it costs, like that much investment in one spot, is that the best use of the Philadelphia Eagles space and finances for a guy who could be injured for half the season? Like, would that money be better used somewhere else to bolster another spot on the roster that you feel like maybe isn't as high ceiling flashy as Jaire Alexander, but just sort of more of like a solid fill in a hole kind of addition?
It does make sense. And I think we know Philly's cap guys can make the finances work. So, just adding more talent in general, that makes sense. But you make an interesting point of would the resources that they would spend on a Jaire Alexander be better elsewhere? Like, I look at their defensive line. That's really what won them the Super Bowl last year, is the defensive line. They had Ojomo, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter on the interior, Nolan Smith, and they had Milton Williams as well with Josh Sweat, and then Jalix Hunt started rotating in as a young guy. Like, they had a massive rotation of players. And I just think that you've lost some of those good players. You've lost a Brandon Graham. You've lost a Josh Sweat, like I said, a Milton Williams as well. You've lost some of those players, and you're replacing them in the rotation with an Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche, maybe a Jahad Campbell. If he's healthy enough, he can rush off the edge a little bit too and add to the pass rush as a blitzer through the interior. That's something he did well in college. You have a Bong in there, but I guess I'm looking at that and saying the point you make of using the resources elsewhere, I think if they can make a good ad, it'd probably still be better as a pass rusher than taking another cornerback when you have so many guys in your secondary that you mentioned trying to get on the field. Adoree Jackson, I think, was a solid upside play as a cornerback. He's another guy who, if he's healthy, brings a lot of athleticism and experience. Andrew Makuba is a guy they drafted out of Texas in the mid-round, second-round pick. I think safety, who I really like, who can play the back end and play that center field and allow a Reed Blankenship or a Sidney Brown or Cooper DeJean to move up. So you have so much talent in the secondary already that you can kind of utilize. I see what you mean by it. But I guess you're playing with house money at this point if you're the Eagles. And if there isn't that level of talent available at edge or for the pass rush, you can't get that. Well, you're probably still better off getting the best player you possibly can at their stage. So that's why I'm in on the move. But I agree with you that if they have a good option available that we're unaware of to add to the pass rush, I'm always going to favor that.
Yeah, like I think about something like if you could get a Von Miller. I know he's people think he's going to come back to the Bills or whatever, but he's still out there in free agency. I don't know what the price tag difference would be, or Jadae Van Clowney's out there. I mean, I know we're talking a lot older than Jaire Alexander at 28, but like those are the kind of like 1 year little mercenary type of signings that can really put you over the top. But I'm not sure that Jaire comes in and has this game changing effect on the back end there that has a lot of players they like. But they've put a lot of money in free agents at the edge rusher too, right? So I mean, they're just trying to get talent wherever they can get it. And I suppose if whoever comes cheaper and easier to just kind of plug in there, I think certainly Vic Fangio can find a way to use Jaire Alexander and get a lot of talent out of him.
Yeah, and the price tag, like you said, because, I mean, what if Jaire Alexander is wanting to get paid like, normal price tag of what he thinks he's worth as a top corner and not one of these, value deals that we're kind of pigeonholing him into. I mean, at that point, if you're the Eagles, are you better trading for Jalen Ramsey? Is there a trade out there that we aren't even aware of brewing behind the scenes that the Eagles could make for an edge rusher or something like that? Maybe Kayvon Thibodeau from the Giants, interdivision trade. Could he be a guy that, I doubt that too. But, the point is we just never know what could happen, who could be available. TJ Watt wants a new contract. What if the Eagles are like, hey, stay in the same state, don't have to move your family, this and that, we'll bring you over here. You just never know, but the Eagles should be willing to pounce on something. But I guess if nothing like that is realistically available, then it would make sense if they can get a bargain on a good player and then a good player to repair his image and a good defense with good talent around him. That could be the best for both worlds. But if we're talking the biggest question for the Eagles, I think like the Chiefs, it's clearly, have they added enough talent to repeat? And I am skeptical. I do not think that the Eagles are going to repeat this year. And I think that some of the talent that they've lost will be a little too much for them to overcome with that same formula twice. We don't see teams win the way that they won a ton. It's usually a one-time thing in these windows in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Eagles themselves, right? When they have come back, it's just they've kind of had to completely redo and rebuild, like not the whole roster, but the core structure, exactly. Of how they're getting there. Like, yeah, I'm with you there. Like, no, we're not saying they're gonna like drop off the map completely. Just like difference between, like, they're still going to be in contention for the NFC East and make a playoff run, but like the team that gets you over the top and goes to the Super Bowl kind of felt like the stars aligned a bit last season, and then when you let everything, when you drain a little bit from everything being perfect, like now it's no longer going to be perfect, and that can be the difference between a divisional round run and a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, that when you have this formula, and look, it is always morphed into Jalen Hurts hate, you know what I mean? But like, we know the truth of how their team is built. We've seen these formulas before. We just saw it with the Eagles do it. And then, go back to the Ravens teams and the Buccaneers teams and even the Giants teams with Eli Manning. Eli Manning was not an elite top 5 quarterback throughout the majority of his career. Maybe he had 1 season or 2 seasons of super high level play. You go back and look and say, okay, maybe you could argue it then he was top 5. But like, Eli Manning was a tier 2 quarterback that was more of a game manager, and they just had a great defense, physical run game, and clutch quarterback play in big moments. And that's exactly what the Eagles formula is as well. And I guess, like you said, we've just seen it's hard to have sustainability when you're not built around an elite quarterback and you're built more in that style. It's usually just everything has to go so right that it usually can only happen for 1 year. So I think I'm with you. I'm going to have Philadelphia to win that division, but I don't see them repeating this year.
Yeah, I think we could just have it's an important distinction, like we were talking about with the Chiefs, right? It's like team is still great, and that's okay. And we're not to be like critical of like, oh no, they ruined everything. It's just like, hey,
right.
Super Bowls are really, really hard to do, and you have to hold the team to a high standard of team building to say, well, maybe they haven't done enough, and that doesn't mean they haven't done enough to be good. It's just they haven't done enough to be like number one.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we got to let history be the best teacher here. And the odds are, in the history of the NFL, that we're not going to see these teams both like the Chiefs aren't going to win, 7 out of 8, like 6 out of 8, like Michael Jordan, something like that. And the Eagles aren't going to just repeat with this, run game defense, loaded roster formula. It's just hard to do that. If they do, it'll be historic, and we'll be here to break it down on Locked On NFL. But it's just, I'm not going to bet on something that I've never seen happen in the NFL before. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Lauren Cox. As we tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.